The third, we have the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. لا تصوموا حتى تروا الهلال. Do not fast حتى تروا, until you see the new moon. Yarhamukallah. Do not fast until you see the new moon. And this hadith I have yet not seen mentioned by those who support astronomical calculations. They will mention the first hadith, fast upon seeing it. But they don't mention the hadith number 3 on the slide. Do not fast until you see the new moon. For obvious reasons. Because number 2 is a command. Number 3, the Prophet ﷺ is directly telling us not to fast. It's a prohibition. لا تصوموا. It's a prohibition in the Arabic language. And a prohibition means that it's something that's haram. It's something that's forbidden. So do not fast until what? There's only one reason given. Until you see the moon. Right? This is more restrictive than the first one. Because the first, when they can say fast upon seeing it, they can say, well, the Prophet ﷺ said fast if you see it, but he did not negate other methods. By hadith number 3 here, the other methods are negated. Right? So what do we have? We have first the second hadith, which gives us a command. The third hadith emphasizes it with a prohibition. Then we have the next hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. إِذَا رَأَيْتُ, when the Prophet ﷺ, إِذَا رَأَيْتُمُ الْهِلَالِ فَصُومُوا. Said, if إِذَا, right? It's a shart. إِذَا رَأَيْتُمُ الْهِلَالِ فَصُومُوا. If you see the new moon, then fast. This statement is conditional. Meaning if you don't see the new moon, should you fast? You should not fast. Right? The contrapositive, you should not fast. Right? So it's conditional. If you see the moon, then you should fast. Which emphasizes the prohibition and the command. And yet if there is doubt, the Prophet says in the hadith, إِن غُمَّ عَلَيْكُمْ, if the moon is concealed. Concealed means what? It's not seen. Which means what? That the actual reason is absent. The reason that would warrant the ruling is absent. Right? In that situation, what should you do? The Prophet ﷺ said, فَأَكْمِلُوا. Then complete Sha'ban, 30. Complete Sha'ban as 30 days. Akmilu is a command. Meaning in the absence of the reason, we don't then rely on astronomical calculations. At the absence of the reason, we count Sha'ban 30 days. These 5 texts prove that the reason that should warrant the beginning of a new month is the sighting of the new moon. Because in every one of these hadith, there is a command to sight it, a prohibition not to do anything else but to sight it, and a conditional statement stating that the fasting should only be done if it's sighted, and also mentioned that in the absence of the reason, what is the course of action? The new month doesn't begin, but Sha'ban should be 30 days. Now, a couple more things about the reason. The first is that a reason is established by if the reason is established by the Sharia, cannot be replaced. If the Sharia says that the reason for the beginning of a month is by seeing the moon, we can't come up and change that. For example, if the Sharia says the reason for Maghrib being obligated is the sun setting, we can't change that and say, well, if Maghrib is halfway before setting, if the sun is halfway before setting, Maghrib is obligated. We can't change, replace, substitute a reason that is directly mentioned in the Quran or the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Which makes us conclude that the reason of the beginning of Ramadan is not the existence or birth of the new moon, but its actual sighting. The proof of that is that exact hadith, if it is concealed. Meaning if you can't see the moon that night, what is the required action? Count Sha'ban 30 days. But could it be possible that that moon actually existed during that cloudy night? It is 100%, it's possible. And it may have happened many times during the lifetime of the companions. But is that a problem? It's not a problem, because that's not the reason. The actual existence of the moon or the actual birth of the moon is not a reason that's defined by the Sharia. The Sharia defined the sighting of that moon as the beginning of the month, which then means the absence of the reason requires the absence of the ruling. If the moon is not sighted, then the new month cannot begin. Now, then the people with astronomical calculations, then we get into a little logical discussion. They say, well, wait a minute. We get into this whole issue of impossibility versus sightings. They say, what if it's astronomically calculated that the moon, they're saying, okay, we're not saying don't use sighting. Use sighting, that's fine. They're saying, but what if it's astronomically calculated that it's impossible to see the moon from this city because at that particular night the moon is somewhere else? And if somebody claims during that night that I saw the moon, we're going to reject his testimony. You understand the situation? Right? Saying astronomically, look, we have calculations right here, and we can show you through these calculations that the moon is impossible for it to be seen in New York City because it's in another part of the earth where it's impossible for New York City to see that moon that night. So they're saying in this situation, we can reject. If we have a few people that said we saw the moon, we're going to say, look, we're going to reject. And that has happened. Well, we're not even going to take your narration or your testimony because it's impossible. Or they go to sleep early, we're not even going to look for the moon because it's impossible to look for the moon. Well, how do we respond to that? Well, number one, we say that this is a subtle attempt to try to justify astronomical calculation. Two, we have some organizations that are caught up in this hybrid approach. It's no. Our method is to do begin the moon through the actual sighting. But if it's astronomically shown it's impossible to see this night, we're not going to accept any testimonies. Well, then the question is then, if you make the astronomical calculation the standard, then what's the whole point of the sighting? Because when you have two things exist at the same time, which one are you going to take? If you say astronomical calculation, then that's your standard. Right? Saying that we're going to follow that we do moon sighting by actually seeing it doesn't really mean anything anymore. And then they also say, well, look, we can't be wrong because this astronomical calculation, this science, we have it down to the minute. We have it down to the second. We know where that moon is. And then we have certain people who get into the whole discussion, well, it's not astronomically precise. There are differences of opinion with the astronomers. How are they measuring where the moon is in respect to what part of the earth? Well, we don't have to get into that. I say, look, it's given. We'll give it to you. That this method is extremely precise. But even if it's precise, it's still not valid because it's not the reason prescribed by the Sharia. No matter how precise it is, we're not going to get into that debate. It still cannot be the reason